I'm Jane Alexander, Nantucket Book Festival alumna, welcoming you to At Home with Authors.
On this episode of At Home with Authors, the debut of Gabriella Burnham. Her childhood took her from Sao Paulo to Nantucket. And now in her first novel, It Is Wood, It Is Stone, Gabriella Burnham transports us back to Brazil. A rave review in the New York Times calls it a remarkable story of secrecy, discovery, and self-expression. Gabby Burnham is a graduate of Nantucket High School's class of 2005. Her deep love of literature was inspired and nurtured by veteran Nantucket teacher Anne Fanoff. Here they are, 15 years later, reunited.
Okay, let's start.
Yeah.
Well, Gabby, I have to begin by saying it is such a delight to talk with you about your first book, It Is Wood, It Is Stone. I read your book for the first time in February, and that was just before we all got sent home, teachers and students. And it was just such a wonderful experience to think that someone I knew as a student sitting in front of me had composed this incredible book. And then, of course, every life changed as we knew it. And then I found out I would have this opportunity to speak with you. And so I went back and reread it just recently. I just finished rereading it last night. And I'm just looking at my notes a little bit here. But both times I was so struck by the power of the book, and just thinking, I had you in one part of my mind, but what I had was this is this first time author, and this book is as richly layered as it is, and these characters are as complex as they are. So I thought maybe a great way to start would be for you just to describe your book from your point of view. Could you just tell us about your book? And if we had talked a little bit about this, perhaps read an excerpt if that seemed
I would love to. And also, well, first I'm going to have to get used to just calling you Anne, because you've been Miss Fanoff in my mind for I don't even know, 20 years now. So, but I've been practicing with all my friends to say, I'm going to be talking with Anne tomorrow. So, but anyway, so this is my book. It Is Wood, It Is Stone. I don't have the real copies yet. This is the advanced copy. Should be coming soon. It comes out July 28th. But really, ultimately, the book is about a woman's reckoning with what it is that she desires from her life. That's how I like to think about it. In the first pages, you learn that Linda, the main character, she's realized that she doesn't really have a life outside of her relationship with her husband, Dennis. She doesn't have her own job. She doesn't have her own money. She doesn't have her own friends. And Dennis enters the picture and says that he has this great opportunity to teach at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. So they pack up their bags and they move to Sao Paulo. And Linda kind of hopes that that's going to solve some of these issues she's having with the sense of disconnect that she has with her life. But when she gets there, it's actually even more heightened because she doesn't now speak the language and she doesn't know the city. So she's having to reckon with this feeling of powerlessness in her life, but it's also couched within the fact that she's also a white American woman in Brazil who's moved to this fancy neighborhood. And she's the wife of a professor who's in a very established position. So, and they have a maid, which is a very new experience for her. She's used to taking care of the home and being sort of that's where she is actually the leader, is in the domestic space. And now she doesn't have that either. So she's having to grapple with this individual sense of powerlessness that she feels. But within the fact that in this larger framework, she actually is in a position of power in a lot of ways, being an American in Brazil, and wealthy also. So that's kind of what the book is about. Yeah. And yeah, I would love to read a little excerpt.
Oh, wonderful. I was thinking, because we had talked about this before, that you were going to read an excerpt. And as I was rereading it, I was thinking, I can't wait to see what excerpt she chooses.
It's the hardest thing. I've been thinking about this a lot. It seems like the beginning would be a good place to start, but I'm actually not going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start a little go a little bit further in after they've been in Brazil at chapter 7. So by this point, Linda, they've been in Brazil for a little bit, and Linda has kind of gone into this tug of war with her maid Marta over the apartment. She wants to take more responsibility of the apartment, and Marta is kind of like, okay, lady, sure, and just ignores her requests essentially to do more in the apartment. So she's done all the touristy things around Sao Paulo. She's done everything, and she's like, I'm bored and there's nothing left for me here. So that's kind of where this chapter starts. Oh, and another important thing is that the book is written to Dennis. So there's a you in the story, and that you is Dennis, her husband. I think it would be good for you to go outside, you said, and pulled some money out of your wallet. Breathe some fresh air. I've been outside, I said, splayed on the bed. There's nothing left for me out there. How about lunch? You threw the money next to me. Take yourself out. I don't want your money, I said, and rolled to face the window. It had been days, possibly even weeks, since I'd gone outside. I couldn't let go of the apartment, even just for an afternoon, for fear that Marta might grow roots in our bedroom and reorganize the air so that I could no longer breathe. She had called that morning from a payphone to say the buses were delayed because of the rain. I could hear the commotion in the background, the anxious stir of late commuters rumbling like a wasp's nest. She wouldn't be in until noon. You left, and in the silence of the apartment, I knew you were right. I needed to get out. The only problem was I didn't have an umbrella. Somehow I'd remembered to pack a garlic press and an English copy of Anna Karenina, but I hadn't brought any rain gear with me. I found a pair of rubber sandals and a shower cap, one of those transparent plastic caps that come in hair dyeing kits, stuffed inside the side pocket of a suitcase. I rifled through the closet, hanger by hanger. I didn't want to wear anything I owned. It all felt drab and old, already used. I emptied half of my clothes onto the floor when your white linen suit appeared from the back of the closet. You had placed it there after your first day of school, I remember, because you were afraid that it would lose its dry, cleaned crease. Initially, I thought, let me just try it on, and I did. The shoulders were too broad, the crotch too low, the sleeves and pants too long. It shouldn't have worked. But when I looked in the mirror, I was captivated. I rolled the sleeves and trousers to reveal the silk mustard lining. It was as though I'd grown a new nose and needed to touch my face to make sure it was real. I fitted the shower cap over my head, tucked my hair inside, and put 50 reais in your pocket. I walked out the back door before I could begin to think of reasons why I shouldn't.
I remember that scene so vividly, and that is just before she goes on to meet Celia, this very important character. Why did you choose that? Why? Obviously, you must have an affection for that particular scene, and it's such an interesting one where she chooses her husband's white linen suit. Mm-hmm. And I found that as I was reading it, so curious. So could you talk about why you chose that scene to read? What it is you like about that scene?
Yeah, well, it's a real kind of the first pivotal moment for Linda, because, you know, she's been trapped in this apartment, and the apartment becomes this very claustrophobic space for her, almost to the point where it feels like she's going mad a bit. And it's the first time where she decides, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to leave. And she makes a series of decisions about expanding the space that she occupies through the book, but this is the first one. I also love kind of like, I think it's a little funny that she's like lying in bed and her husband's like, can you please just go out and get some lunch? And she's like, there's nothing left for me out there. It's like the sort of funny, dramatic, you know, but then also I love this image of her in drag. You know, she's kind of like, I'm going to dress in drag in order to go out and be my true self.
Yeah.
And that drag is literally her husband's clothes. So, you know, it kind of, I think, captures the the little bits of humor, I think, but also, a bit of Linda's strangeness too.
And, we
Yeah.
talked about the strangers when we chatted last time. One of the things you said to me, and I found this so interesting, you said the reader's job, when you write, you think that the reader's job is to figure out what is going on underneath. And you said that to me just before I reread. And just as you said, why, and I don't, there's so much wonderful mystery that you weave into your characters. And I so enjoy that dimension of your writing, that you're not worried about guiding your reader through the steps, which I find very impressive in a first work. You seem to have just happily left behind the nervousness that your reader wouldn't follow you. Your character feels so real. When you said that, well, it's the reader's job to sort of figure out what's going on underneath. And Linda, your main character, as you said, she's living this wonderful, wonderful life. And that act of putting on Dennis's white linen suit, which he adores, was such an act of aggression.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know. I found that fascinating.
Yeah. And I will say that, and this is completely true, I think where I originally learned that is the type of literature I love, the type of literature that isn't trying to tell the reader what to think, but really to look at the book as almost like a detective's work, or to really find the symbols and images. I learned that in your class, in reading books and understanding how to kind of contextualize them and what's happening historically at that time. But then also enough to like remove the work from the author and like what the author is trying to say, but really as like a piece in a historic moment, or I'm thinking about that so much in the books that are coming out now and the time that we're living in, but how fiction can communicate something that's happening in a time. And that really, that started for me in my, English class, our AP English class in high school at Nantucket High, where I started realizing like, wow, that's so powerful that literature can do that. And so I wanted to write a book that I love to read. And I think that's where that came from.
Is it an unfair question, Gabby, to ask you if you remember a text where that happened? I'm just curious. Do you remember any of the books that you read that far back in high school? That would have impressed you in that way?
Well, so the first book I read in your class, which was for an independent reading study, because you had like the curriculum of books that we had to read, which back then was like, I just remember Beowulf, and like, so I understand that it's kind of evolved since then, but we got this independent study, and the first book I read that I absolutely adored was Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabor Garcia Marquez. And that's really because that book, to me, just completely blew open the doors in terms of what literature can be. That any idea of like what reality has to be in a novel, even the span of time, the fact that the book kind of starts at the end of this great love, and then a new love starts. I was fascinated, like, wow, literature isn't just about entertainment in some ways, it's about like reconstructing the way that we can see the world. And I take literature that seriously. I really think that that's what a good book can do and what makes it so powerful. So that's kind of, it's ambitious, but it's what I strive for when I write too. And those are the kinds of books that I love.
I do remember your affection for that book. And I just love In the Time of Marquez and his magical realism. I just, it's just such beautiful work. And I do continue to put that book in certain people's hands, and it's interesting with whom it resonates and with whom it doesn't. And so that kind of leads me to another question I wanted to just ask you about is, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey to becoming a writer. I just remember you as a passionate student of literature, a passionate person, period. And some people have said, did you see that in Gabby? Did you know? And I said, I knew she was brilliant. I knew she was an amazing writer, and I just knew she was a wonderful human being. But no, I didn't know that. I didn't look at you and say, oh, there's a.
Yeah.
So could you talk about that journey a little bit?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because, I don't think I knew it in myself that I was going to be a writer. But then I kind of went back and started thinking about, all right, what did I want to be? And I have a book from like Cyrus, actually it might be our yearbook from Cyrus Pierce Middle School, where I said that I wanted to be a journalist. And so I think I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know that like being an author was a thing that I could be. It was almost like saying like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. Like, yeah, that would be great, but like, that's not going to happen for me. I don't think I realized I could be an author until like 6 months ago. And I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing it. I'm an author now. But yeah, I mean, for me, I had to make money. That was the reality. I had to choose a profession where I could make money immediately. And that's not always the journey for writers. And so, yeah, I mean, it started, I guess, when I left Nantucket. I was 18. I went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. And I graduated in the height of the recession. I graduated in 2009. And so, I graduated with honors. I had an English literature degree. I wanted to be in the space of writing or books in general, but no one was hiring at all. I actually got an interview with Random House's. They had this like internship program where you could do a rotation, and I got an interview and I was so excited. And then a couple weeks later, they said, sorry, we're folding the internship. We can't do any hiring. So the first job I actually had out of college was working as a hostess at a fish house on the Berlin Turnpike in Connecticut, which it was called Carmen Anthony's. It's not there anymore, but it was a place I'd eaten many times before when I was in college. And yeah, I got it. My boyfriend at the time and I literally took a car down the Berlin Turnpike and we stopped at restaurants, and I had a printout of my resume and I handed them to different general managers at restaurants, hoping that they would hire me as a hostess. Like, I was crossing my fingers. And I walked in and they were so excited. They were like, wow, this girl just showed up and we need a hostess. You're hired. And so that's how I was making money. And I wasn't writing a lot at that time because I was just, it was a lot to take in that moment. But yeah, I ended up moving to Boston after that and got a job at a mall. I was working retail. And then I was working with my roommate, actually, who I had an apartment with. She got me a job at the retail spot, Francesca's, where she worked. And I would go into the back during my break and talk to headhunters trying to find a job. And so I got a job at an immigration law firm as a paralegal. And I was so amazed that they were going to pay me a salary, that it wasn't an hourly job. Like, that blew my mind. I was like, wow, you're going to offer me $35,000 a year to work there? Amazing. So I took that job and I didn't even know what a paralegal was, to be honest. And I ended up working in immigration law for 10 years. And I worked up the ranks. I ended up going to, a multinational law firm. And yeah, had a very decent career. My last job was as a systems design strategist. I was doing a full career, but writing on the side, and ended up getting my MFA. I live in New York now. I'm in Brooklyn. And yeah, finished this book. And I was really doing it to just like sustain my sense of love for literature. And really, I say it was to keep me alive in a lot of ways, because I'm not necessarily bred for the 40-hour-a-week, 9-to-5 type job. And so writing early in the morning and late at night and on the weekends was like me kind of retelling myself, like, this is actually who you are and what you love to do. And it was almost a form of like grounding in that. And so I finished the book, and then I was like, why don't I just try to sell it? Why not? And it actually worked out. So now it's happening.
So tell me, Gabby, how did this book come to be? And again, I just go back to how complete your vision of Linda, of Dennis, of Celia, of Marta, these relationships and these people feel so fully developed. They just feel so real. And the female friendships in these books are so powerful. The way they push and pull at each other is fascinating to me. And then poor Dennis, is sort of his way through it. How did this come to be? How did this particular book come to be? What was the germ of the idea, or how did you develop it?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. About the characters, truly. Yeah, the origin of this book really started with Brazil. Once I learned that I could write about Brazil, that's when the characters sort of broke open. And they like almost came out of the soil of Brazil. I'm a Brazilian citizen. My mother is from Brazil. My entire family that I know lives in Brazil. But even with all of that, it took me a really long time to know that I actually could claim that part of my identity. It took a while to get there. I think, even though growing up on Nantucket, even to this day, my best friends are from Nantucket, and we have weekly Zoom calls, and I love them dearly, but none of them really have my story of, being the child of an immigrant who's a single mother. It was, we struggled a lot, but that wasn't always reflected back at me. And same thing at Trinity. It's a largely wealthy white college. And for a long time, I think I was just trying to be the people around me. I was really trying to fit in and didn't really explore the part of me that is grounded in being a Brazilian American and having this kind of split identity in a lot of ways, and exploring the aspects of that I can actually connect to. And so it wasn't really until I got to New York and started meeting more people here who spoke really fluently in the idea of fractured identity, other artists, going to my MFA program, that I realized I can actually write about Brazil and feel okay about that. And I still struggle with it in some ways, honestly. And I'm so proud to hear that people who are familiar with São Paulo actually see São Paulo in my book, because not actually being from there, I worried, am I going to get this right? And it took a really long time for me to get to a place where I'm actually, I do think that I'm getting the ethos of Brazil in this book. So once I did that, and once I really felt comfortable about writing about Brazil, the character of Linda kind of germinated from that, because she is someone who is struggling with what it means to be a fully realized self in the context of Brazil, even though she is an American. So that's where this book comes from. And it's truly just an exploration of that. It doesn't come to any conclusion. I haven't come to any conclusions about what my identity is. If I'm a Brazilian American, or if I'm American, if I'm white, if I'm a Latina, I don't really know, to be honest. But so this book explores what that means, and kind of the complex power relationships that come with the identity that you claim too.
And it's so interesting because throughout the text, while Linda is in, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because while Linda is in Sao Paulo, the references, she's talking to, I think maybe it's Celia, and she's discussing a street, maybe, I don't know if it's I think was it in Boston when she goes on when she's walking around, where is it again, Gabby? She describes.
Yeah. When she and Dennis walk to the Peru and the Copley. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was so fascinating, because you're taking me through Brazil and this remote beach they go to, and I feel like I'm on the bus with them going deeper in. And while we get into these remote beautiful places in Brazil, Linda, your protagonist, is describing this trip, this walking trip to the Pru in Boston. And so even as you go deeper into Brazil, you're entertaining this character by describing Boston. And you talk about the Red Sox winning the World Series and all these references. So it's very seamless the way these characters, or the way at least Linda navigates these worlds. And I just thought that was so beautifully and masterfully done.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Well, so much, I think Linda inhabits so many different spaces in the book, and that the way that she starts to understand herself is through the spaces that she inhabits, and that includes her own body. Linda often feels very disconnected from her body in the beginning of the book, and sort of knowing where she's supposed to be and what she's supposed to be doing with her hands. At one point, she even starts like hurting herself in the middle of the night without her, subconsciously, without her knowing it. And she would wake up with these cuts on her hands. So sense of place can be both a means to feel discomfort for Linda. Like she sometimes doesn't feel like she belongs, but then as she's reclaimed space, that's when she starts to understand herself too. So yeah, place is a really important aspect of the book for me.
Yeah, and I felt that as I read it. I also felt the mystery of the relationships, Linda's disdain for Dennis, who seems to really love her. He seems to really love her as best he can. Her fascination for Celia, and her honesty at times about, is Celia a nice person or not? Who is Celia? And then Marta, you just open up Marta with this. Marta becomes, and you develop sort of another narrative within the narrative of Marta's life. And there were times where I wondered if you felt greater affection for some characters than another, or if you felt that all the characters are variation of each other. They're all such different characters. And even Marta introduces Felina, her sister, who becomes so important. And I think she's, it was like a Shakespearean text in that, this other character's coming out. We thought we had our main, the
ensemble.
Ensemble, and yet here's Felina, who anyway, I don't want to give things away, but they all have a weight. They all have a real role. None of them could be removed. And I guess what I'm wondering is, did you, as a writer, was there a particular affection for one of them? Are they variations of another? I just wonder how you look at your ensemble.
No, I definitely have favorite characters. Marta is my favorite character. I'll just say it. I love her, and it's been really great to see the character. Readers resonate with Marta too. I also really love Linda though, and I think that Linda can be a frustrating character, and I know that, and she was designed that way. Hopefully she learns enough where she by the end that she learns how to kind of offer care to others and isn't just completely internalized in her experience. And that's really the growth of Linda. But yeah, Marta is my favorite character. She's, to me, like what every person should be in terms of like grounded in themselves. She's just, and I loved, it was so much fun to write the interactions between Linda and Marta, where Linda is kind of having this like breakdown of self, and she's like, what am I doing here? Can I please chop an onion? Just let me chop an onion. And Marta is just like, lady, figure yourself out. I don't care. Don't involve me in this. And so it was great for Marta to be this character that doesn't really it's almost like Linda desperately wants Marta to be part of her transformation, and Marta is like, that's not my responsibility. But then they end up forming this bond in in these kind of small shared experiences, that was also really beautiful to write. So,
and I love the way you have them develop the bond, because it feels very real. It feels very real in that the way two people who come from such separate worlds can appreciate each other and love each other, but never really, I don't know. It's just not Disney, you know. It's sort of like they both have paths, and for a while they join each other on a path, but they have their own distinct paths, which I thought was so beautifully crafted. I wanted to just touch on your title, and It Is Wood, It Is Stone, and I know that the song, and I even, you know, found the song and was listening to the song and kind of got the song in my head. It's very mesmerizing.
Yeah.
But I noticed on page 196, you write about Dennis and Linda. And the quote that I jotted down was, "We were beginning to dissolve. We had turned stone into liquid." And that just resonated for me. And I'm just wondering if you could just talk briefly about that kind of imagery, if you don't mind. It is wood, it is stone. And then I just loved, and it didn't really grab me until the second time I had read, but that the way you sort of developed that metaphor.
Yeah. See, I knew that you would be the person to pick up on that. And that's what I was thinking about while I was reading it. I mean, writing it. But no, 100%. I mean, the title, It Is Wood, It Is Stone, is the first line of a very famous Brazilian song called Águas de Março, that has been remade many times. The version that I listened to constantly while writing this was the Elis Regina version, that is so beautiful and painful. And she's also, Elis Regina, the artist, is kind of a national treasure of Brazil, but she died really young. I almost want to say like an Amy Winehouse, but not really, because she was so politically active at a time when Brazil was still under military dictatorship. And she wrote and sang about Brazil and the experience of Brazil when a lot of art was being censored. So she just as an artist is really incredible. But the lyrics of the song are very abstract. I mean, it's a bossa nova jazz standard, and it's just really these images of like wood and stone and glass and footprints and loneliness, all washing together in the waters of March, which is the end of summer for Brazil. And so it's almost like this feeling of like all of life's experiences washing together, and it's not linear. They're all colliding at once, but then at the end, it's like almost like a rebirth of, you know, it's the end of summer, but you know, all the water is together now. So I loved that. But then it almost seemed like this opportunity, like what we were talking about before with novels having these images that repeat or come up again, that symbolize something. And it's almost the reader's job to investigate what that could mean. And I really thought about like, oh, if I were a student reading this, I would be able to write an essay about, you know, the images of wood and stone that appear and what they could mean. And I have my own ideas of what they mean, but I almost like don't even, in some ways it's like not fun if the author is just like, yeah, this is what I meant. But yeah, it's the natural elements that kind of take different shapes and kind of follow these characters through. There's also an image of one point, a young girl throws a stone in Linda's direction, and Marta, when she's younger, she hears racist slurs being told to her over and over again. It feels like stones that she's swallowing. But there's also a lot of wooden chairs that they sit in that support them. So yeah, that was fun to do too.
Yeah, beautiful elements. And what I love is that push and pull of the beauty, the sensitivity, the artistry, the violence, like the dance. I don't know, how do you pronounce it, Gabby? The capoeira or?
Yeah, capoeira.
Capoeira.
Yeah.
When Celia takes her to see this performance, and it's very disturbing, and she explains that, you know, it's an indigenous dance and it goes all the way back to slaves, I believe, acting out, you know, sort of violent, and Linda is so almost traumatized by it. and Celia sort of, and I just love that integration of things that are hard and painful with beautiful and gentle. And I think that works, that motif is really throughout your book in such a beautiful way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sort of covers a lot of the questions I have, except for just anything you wanted to add, and also just moving forward. What have you learned about yourself as a writer from this book? And, has it, is there something that you're taking from this experience that's feeding you on as you move forward?
Oh my God, I've learned so much. It's hard to understate that. I've learned so much about how to write a book. I, in some ways, will never write a book the way I wrote this one again, because it was so much trial and error and figuring out what works and what doesn't. I've started writing a second book. It's probably too early to say anything about it, but it does take place on an island. I will say that. So that's been really fun. And yeah, and also I've learned so much about the publishing process, which is very like a wild experience in so many different ways. Before getting on this call, I learned that my book was reviewed in the New York Times Book Review today, which I was like, never thought. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
The screen to you. Congratulations,
yeah,
Abby.
Thank you. Yeah, but mostly what I've learned is that like, when I first got an agent for my book, even immediately I started worrying about what was going to happen. I was like, what does this mean? I'm so nervous. And I'm learning to just like really appreciate every little tiny thing that happens and like take that in. I think that that's been the most important learning process, that if something good happens, I don't have to worry about what it means for the next step. That, even just the smallest thing, like getting a feature, having my book in like the necessities of the summer and N magazine. I was thrilled. I put that all over social media,
Oh, it's a big deal. It's
such a big deal. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on your book review. When will that be published? Did they share that with you?
It's probably going to be in the next couple weeks, but the team at Random House is trying to figure out when it's going to be in print, but it will be in print. So
I look forward to it, Gabby. It's such a gift to me to read your book and to just see, just to see the work that you are doing and the richness, the quality of it. My daughter was here. She just graduated from college and she had some friends over and I was handing them the book and I said, you should read this. And well, I just think for young women and the relationships, the journey, there's so much to it. And I said, this was actually written by a student of mine. But it's better than half the books I have on my table. You know what I mean? It was just, what a gift to know that I knew you while you were on this journey. I knew you as a young woman and that your journey has become such a beautiful journey.
Thank you. And I will say that you didn't just know me. I mean, honestly, I'm not just saying this. It really, for me, started in your class where I think we talked about this a bit, that like, I can be a very picky reader. It's very difficult for me to find a book that I absolutely adore. But when I adore a book, it's like I cling on to it like this. Like this is it's a part of me now. And I learned that from watching the way that you react to books. Seeing someone who's so like, you love literature in a way that literature isn't necessarily always valued now. And seeing that and then recognizing that in myself, it really was kind of like the starting point of knowing that no matter what job I have, even if I'm working at, a fish house on the Berlin Turnpike, or if I'm, a published author, or if I'm working at a law firm, like literature can always be in my life. It's not something that someone can take from me, and writing too. And I really learned that in your class. Well, when people are telling me to not be an English lit major because you can't get a job, it really doesn't matter.
And I hope and pray that's still true. I believe it will always be true. I believe
so too.
Yes. But thank you, because you just retaught me something. you get a little weary, especially after 3 months of remote learning and looking at students through a screen, you know, and not having the gratification of having them in person. So you have to kind of pitch your pitch a little more fervently. And people like you and these conversations shore up teachers. Teachers need to be fed. And when they're fed by their students, it's a special gift.
Amen. Teachers need to be fed. They need to be paid more. They need to be held up. They're essential workers, all of that.
Well,
yes.
Well,
and I told you I taught for a little bit, and I really did think back on, especially, I mean, I taught freshmen in college, but high school teachers, I mean, you have to be this amazing balance of extroverted and also very sensitive.
Yeah.
Like, it takes so much energy to run a classroom, especially through a screen, I'm sure. But then also to be sensitive to individuals as they learn and the intricacies of like an individual student, what they're going through. But really, it made such an impression on me. And you would stay after school with me and look at my college essay, and all the little notes you like would make on my essays. It was just like all of that would just fuel me to think like, I can actually do this. This is something that I could do even after high school. So.
Well, it's wonderful to talk with you, Gabby. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't wait to see you again.